Not every star should be wished upon, and not all water is life-giving. I am the Keeper, he who speaks the tales that seep through the veil. Tonight, we will delve together into the cosmic horrors that reign from the heavens and lurk below. When I try to explain it, I have to wonder if I'm being stalked or just going crazy. I've never had a hallucination before, but my experience has me now believing in things I used to scoff at. This all started last October during my drive through northern Connecticut. I was returning home from visiting my brother who had been dealing with some unresolved trauma. Both of us had been. My visit had dragged on longer than I intended, and by the time I was on the road, it was almost midnight. I had a 7-hour drive that would take me meandering through the scenic countryside. I had been traversing past old towns for about an hour when a deep fog rolled in. This was not unusual for this time of year, so I didn't initially think much of it. I slowed my car down to a safer speed, about 30 miles per hour. The thickness of the fog was demanding on my eyesight, forcing me to lean forward in my seat as I attempted to peer through the obscured ambiance. At last, I began to see more than just the dispersed water, but my heart dropped. Through the canopy of mist, I saw the tree trunks. They were gnarled and twisted in an inexplicable manner. Like an AI tried to render a scene of nature, but phoned it in halfway through. I shook my head violently, attempting to convince myself that I must be getting tired, but the trees became no less surreal. The changing of the sky arrested my bewilderment and forcefully exchanged it with shock. Below the shimmering black rays of sunlight, which began to part the fog beneath them, a being floated. It was majestic and uncanny. Humanoid in appearance, yet monstrous in its aura. Its proportions were off in a way that tingled the parts of the brain responsible for both disgust and admiration. I pulled over as my car engine began to sputter and go silent. My heart was pounding as I got out. I don't know entirely why I did. Part of me was stricken with fear over seeing more of that being, but that same part of me had more fear of not seeing it fully. The entire forest grew silent. Fog was now almost entirely gone. The only evidence of its evanescent presence being the humidity that clung to my car's window. I looked up in the sky where the being should have been. What I saw buckled me to my knees. It was a giant circular shape. The formation of the shape was slightly bent, giving it an eye-like appearance. Inside the ring of floating steel was an eye of vapor. I then understood what happened to the mist and the sound. A vacuum was gently pulling the noise toward it and beckoning my soul to behold it. I remember whispering, "What the hell?" under my breath, but the words fluttered noiselessly from my lips as they were fished through the air by this floating structure. Immediately after, the noise started. This was not a return of the noise that I should have been hearing, but a new noise being born from this magnificent machine. A deep, reverberant hum that rippled through the ground. It traversed through my shoes and my spine violently. It was so low that I felt it more than I heard it. The trees reacted to its utterance, their leaves shaking off their branches from the unrelenting vibration. The eye in the sky began to rotate slowly, accelerating in speed. Suddenly, beams of light brimmed from it and cascaded beyond me until they returned and bent around the structure supernaturally. This symphony of luminance blinded my vision. When my eyesight returned, I saw the beams shifting in their patterns, creating living shapes, like long-forgotten symbols of antiquity, crawling about the air. I stumbled backward and tripped on the berm of the road as my heart began pounding thunderously. I scrambled to get back into my car as I became more coherent of the danger I was in. I started slamming my car as I attempted to start it, Had the vacuum not been pilfering the sound, I think I would have gone deaf from my car horn with how hard I was slamming it. Finally, the car started, but I was not in control. The colors of the light on my dashboard began to warble and form similar shapes to those in the air. I began shaking in fear and frustration as I felt my entire world was glitching. I then heard a whisper that both soothed and terrified me. It wasn't in my ears, it was inside my skull, like someone had spoken directly into my soul. A single, fragmented word. Found. The slamming on my steering wheel ceased as I was gripped by fear. The hum around me turned into a rhythmic thudding, like a creature was taking enormous steps somewhere deep within the earth. The eye above me constricted, and all the beams of light receded into a sharp snap. In a brazen flash, the being returned. It slithered out of the eye in a chaotic yet majestic cadence. It began to lower itself to the ground as if it were dangling from invisible threads. It was tall, far too tall to be of this earth. Its arms were the length of its standing body. Its fingers were gnarled in their shape, but smooth in their glossy complexion. What fascinated me most was the face it lacked. Where this body feature should have been was displayed only a featureless oval that reflected white light like wet clay. I could feel all the organs in my body begin to pulse in rhythm with the thudding as I realized it was beckoning to me. With all my might, I shook off the pull of its allure and slammed my foot down on the gas. To my amazement, my car began accelerating. Frantically, I made the most ugly U-turn of my life as I began careening down the road in the opposite direction I had arrived. My car's radio turned on and began blaring in angry refusal as I created distance between myself and the entity. Only there was no melody of music from the radio. It was a cacophony of sounds, too irreverent of earthly origin to describe. They wailed and thralled in my ears so viciously I had to wonder if it was actually from the radio or from the growing madness of my own mind. The trees of the forest joined the protest of my escape as they bent inward toward the road as I passed them. Some snapped viciously as they proceeded to ooze out of black, dark fluid. A fluid that matched the luxurious sheen of that being. The pedal beneath my foot must have been scraping into the floor of my car. However, to my relief, I could see the hellish scene behind me growing smaller in my rearview mirror. The sound around me didn't properly return for another 15 miles. I could no longer see the being, the eye, or any misshapen trees. But I was being followed. I could feel it. The radio had long since returned to normal, broadcasting the rock station I generally listened to. Despite this return to normal, I was shaking. My nerves were a wreck, and I was desperately trying to process what I had seen, and why, despite being so shaken by it, I wanted to see it again. For days afterward, I tried to persuade myself that nothing had happened, that this was all either from sleep deprivation or being spooked by the dark. Any rationalization sounded better than admitting it could have been something vast, intelligent, and looking for me. I had almost fooled myself into this facade of security, but a week later that faith was shaken. As I was walking my dog, something I do most nights before going to bed, I was wrestling with a sense of melancholy I couldn't quite put into words. My reflection was shuttered when I noticed white clouds swirling above my house in a circular pattern. They created a shape eerily similar to the eye. Then it blinked. I was buckled to my knees again as I heard a loud, "Found you," from deep inside my soul. I don't think it was an eye in the sky. I think it was something looking through it. It was that being. It knows where I live, yet this time, I don't know if I will run. There's no easy way to describe the events at Lake Mithril, mostly because now the lake no longer exists. At least not in the way it once traumatized us. Not in the way it once sounded. Yes, this lake uttered a sound. Let's start with the beginning. Last summer, my friend Josh decided to convince our friend group to do an outdoorsy activity. Initially, they wanted to go rock climbing. I don't hate rock climbing, but I felt a strong urge to go to the lake. It was easy to persuade our friend group to change their minds. I don't know why I felt so strongly to reroute our plans, but in hindsight, I wish I didn't. Lake Mithril wasn't a tourist destination. It wasn't on any maps Josh had. His friend Luke had discovered it through some old hiking post. The kind of post where people upload grainy pictures of creepy events they claim to have experienced. The post revealing the lake had clear instructions. The poster wanted to share it, but also wanted to ensure it was kept clean and relatively untouched. It took us a long, lonely hike to reach it. The forest around it was heavy and damp from the humidity the lake produced. The earth we trudged through was wet and uneven. It was not muddy, but sponge-like. Every step we took sunk into the ground and gave you an awkward bouncy feel as you pressed forward. Despite how laborious it was to travel, I was enjoying the scenery of the Massachusetts wilderness. As we reached the lake, I was expecting moonlight to be shimmering on the water. I learned quickly that Lake Mithril does not shimmer. It absorbed the splendorous moonlight around it and trapped it in its mirror, dark sheet of algae. This canopy of algae was so black it looked like obsidian. It was also barren of noise or any signs of life. There were no ripples, no insects flying over it, no fish disturbing its depths, not even the faintest gust of wind to produce a sound from this vast body of water. There was only the eerie silence. About 30 yards from the shoreline, we started setting up our camp. Josh, Luke, and Sally, my girlfriend, were all in high spirits. We talked about the crazy hike it took for us to get there and began enjoying some drinks. But our friend Cassandra kept looking at the lake like she was shaking the feeling of being watched. The first sound came sometime around midnight. It did not originate from the trees or any animals, but from the water itself. It was a low groan that rolled across the surface. It was deep and vibrated our tent poles and shook our bones. It was a sound no wave should be able to produce. It was a sound that had me wondering if something was stirring deep below. We all scrambled within our tents to grab our flashlights and makeshift weapons. Josh aimed his flashlight at the lake. Just as the lake had done with the moonlight, the beam of his flashlight was absorbed and denied. There was no reflection, and there was no revelation of what had made the noise. "Do lakes make noise like that?" Luke whispered. No one dared answer. Movement in the water clutched our focus firmly. All of us stared dumbfounded as a bulge began to rise from the center of the lake. The bulge caused a ripple across the water, disturbing the algae and sending rays of light bursting from them. The light was blinding but captivating. As soon as my eyesight was recovered, I pried my fixation back onto the lake. More ripples were being produced, and more light was escaping the darkened aquatic sheet, but the light was diminishing in luminance with every ripple. I wish I could say we did the smart thing, but we didn't. We stood there transfixed at the lake's ominous performance. The return of silence broke the spell. We looked at each other worriedly, as if about to ask each other if we should run into the dark forest. Another ripple in the water denied that conversation. This ripple was louder and more surreal than the others. It did not ripple outward, it rippled inward. It was accompanied by a voice so unique and magnificent, I will never forget it. Oh. The word it uttered sent shivers down our spines. It didn't feel mortal, but like hearing something talk in a dream. But so visceral and pain-inducing we knew we had the misfortune of being awake. "Run!" I shouted, taking initiative. More cascades erupted in the water as something began to rise from its depths. I had no intention of finding out exactly what it was. I wanted to get us the hell out of there. No one argued. They began sprinting behind me. As we entered the forest, I grabbed Sally's hand. Her pulse was raging. Our feet began to trample the spongy dirt. But now it was different. This spongy dirt began to ripple and vibrate in such a manner it felt alive. The vibrations drilling into us through our shoes felt like a foreign heartbeat, pacing to a dark, malicious rhythm. Eventually, we reached a fork in the trail. We had two options: take the left, which we had taken to arrive there, which was shorter, or the more scenic route to the right. The sound of crunching forestry behind us reinforced the need to decide quickly. "We're moving left!" I shouted, thinking the choice was obvious. I suddenly felt a sense of dread after shouting that. That path would lead us past a small pond. Would that water be problematic? Was all the water here infested with whatever evil was chasing us? No, you're making the right choice. Lead them all, I thought. I don't know why I felt so reassured. It was a silly trail of thought to begin with, but also a silly, almost foreign way for me to reason with myself. But I forced all thought from my mind as I kept up a pace for my friends to follow. We were almost beyond this pond when I heard a scream behind us. "Help!" Josh screamed as tendrils from the pond wrapped around his feet and pulled him into the water. "What?" I said as I turned around, but to my horror, the pond was now bubbling crimson. The sound of our pursuer grew louder. The tendrils began to loosen and writhe within the pond, as if losing interest in their fresh catch, and hungry for another. "Keep going!" I shouted, horrified with myself for not doing anything to help Josh, but unwilling to lose another friend. If we could reach our cars, maybe we could be safe. Maybe we could live to get help, to find out what it was that just killed him. Finally, we reached our vehicles. Our hearts were pounding, and the noise behind us became eerily non-existent. Despite the cessation of the noise, we frantically got inside our cars and sped down the road. We met up at the parking lot of the nearest gas station. Sally and Luke were hysterical. Cassandra and I tried to reason with them that we couldn't go back. Not until we found help. I called 911 and was assured that help would be on the way. Shortly after my call with the police, I received a text from Josh. "You led him well." I almost dropped my phone when I read this. How is this possible? Was Josh still alive? Or was something texting for him? What did "leading him well" mean? Would he have survived if we had gone right? I am almost certain now that he would have. Guilt was etched inside me as I wondered why I was so adamant to go left, so adamant to do this trip at all. I then remembered the thoughts that made me make those choices. Were they even mine? The flash of blue and red disrupted my internal reflection as the police arrived. We gave them our story, and the officer started coordinating with the forest rangers to search for Josh. The search party did not find Josh, and they did not find a pond or a lake. The forest, they said, was as dry as a bone. We were questioned for weeks. Josh's parents were furious. The police were certain we were abusing stimulants, but our tests came back clean. They were contemplating charging us with murder, but Josh's phone started getting triangulated by the police, showing up at random places throughout the state, but moving too quickly to be caught. No murder charges were brought against us. I showed the police the text I had received from Josh's phone. This now has them believing that someone else killed him in the forest and has hidden his remains. They still don't believe us about the lake, deciding for us that we may have witnessed a murder in the dark, and that the trauma has warped our memories. Weeks later, I received another text from Josh. "Next, you will lead Sally. Then you will become my voice. You will herald my return. You will describe my glory to the masses." I was shaken when I read this. I don't know what kind of sick joke was being played on me, but I was not amused. I showed this to the police. They urged me to be careful. I have given that phone to the police and have started a new plan with a new number. I have also, it hurts to write this out, I have broken off things with Sally. I didn't tell her why. I made up some bullshit reason to be mad and to end things. I can't stop thinking about how I led us into the forest and down that path. I don't know if I can trust myself, and if, whatever the hell this thing is, wants Sally, I can't risk it. I can't risk my mistakes putting her in danger. If I ever find out what is going on, I will ask her to forgive me. But for now, I think it is better that I stay alone, or as alone as I can be. I wish that was the end of this story, as bitter and depressing as it would be, but it isn't. After relocating and getting a new life together, I received a new text from a number I wish I could forget. Your number may change, but my plans do not. My father never believed our planet was alone in the dark. He didn't mean aliens in the strictly sci-fi sense, but in a more ancient and primordial degree. He believed there was something ancient, something that slept dormant within reality's core, waking only to bring its designs to an end. Grief can be an alluring gateway to madness. He worked as an astrophysicist at a small observatory in eastern Rhode Island. Growing up, I used to visit him during his late shifts. His work environment reeked of old, degrading electronics and long-neglected dust. The one piece of equipment he did keep in good repair was his state-of-the-art telescope, the Leviathan, aptly named for how it towered over everything, and everyone in the room it was housed. After Mom died, I stopped seeing him at work. I hardly saw him at all anymore. A nanny was hired to take care of my brother and I. Father became cold and distant. I slowly gave up trying to have a meaningful connection with him, as every conversation I attempted to have was dulled by his apparent distracted attention. He would nod through my stories of my personal life, and I could tell his focus was on his work, on what the Leviathan was showing him. All this changed 2 years ago. Inexplicably, he texted me, asking me to come to work with him. I was hesitant, and a little resentful, knowing he wanted to see me, but the focal point of this reconnection being his work felt hollow. I didn't have the heart to turn him down, though. It had been hard enough losing Mom. Maybe I could pull Dad back from his grief and salvage our failed relationship. When I arrived, the laboratory was spotless. My father's eyes were bloodshot and he was grimly pale, moving erratically as he greeted me. I was shocked to see no evidence of a single speck of dust throughout the laboratory. It was as if he had been intent to rid even the smallest of distractions from the purity of his work. "Come here. You have to look," he whispered aggressively. His emaciated hand clutched my arm and dragged me behind him. He led me up a flight of metal stairs to the Leviathan. "You need to see it," he said flatly, gesturing to the enormous telescope before dashing away from me and fiddling through the room. I could hear him cleaning compulsively as I leaned into the eyepiece. I expected to see celestial, but predictable scenery, perhaps a cool combination of colors from a gas planet. What I saw perplexed me. I was beholding a star, unlike any I had ever seen. It was pulsing in rhythm. A slow pulse, a fast pulse, followed by 3 pulses of such blistering speed my eyes almost failed to discern them as a singular burst. Each pulse corresponded with a change in color. "Is the telescope broken?" I asked, bewildered, trying to think how a celestial body could be changing color so rapidly. "No, the Leviathan is perfect. I keep it perfect. It will always be perfect," my father said as he rubbed his hand against the metal casing of the instrument. His eyes were fierce and protective. His gaze pierced into me like he wanted to accuse me of heresy for doubting the proficiency of his sacred object. before I could protest at how this would be impossible, outside of atmospheric scintillation, which I had presumed the Leviathan had been modified to account for, he threw down a thick stack of paper. He began scattering the papers about, suddenly disinterested in his fascination for cleanliness, my edification of his grand discovery trumping any other sense of reason. I could barely keep up with his cascade of firmly asserted facts as he detailed his years of meticulous documentation. The pulses, they match binary. The star is alive. The star is speaking to me. It is now speaking to you. This was the first statement of his rambling I could properly understand. I was doubtful and hurt to know he had spent so much time away from the family that needed him, only to be pulled into such a delusion over what could only possibly be explained from a faulty telescope struck my soul. However, I bit my tongue. Hopefully, in time, I could get him to see the error of his ways. For the next week, I continued to visit him at the laboratory. The pattern of the star's pulsing remained consistent, but it grew in intensity. I was surprised that there were not any other variations in the sequence. Assuredly, a broken telescope would eventually have more variance in its faulty readings. This question became an afterthought as I began to have the dreams. I was floating listlessly over a vast crimson landscape. The scenery below me had thick, massive crevices filled with black, shadowy depths, separating the red landmasses. These now cracked stretches of scarlet sheen and reflected like polished clay. The crevice below me grew in its well of darkness, the red land being thrust in every direction with the clamor of unholy sounds as the darkness conquered it. Something stirred in the expanding darkness, a shape like a serpent made of white, wisping fire. It circled around in an oval-shaped pattern, as if it was racing to see its tail. Its movement was elegant but jarring, like it was sleep slithering but with baleful purpose. I awoke with the taste of burnt metal in my mouth and a bloody nose. My father had a similar dream, as did some of his astronomer colleagues. My father was delighted that the star was speaking to me as it had for him. I was worried that there was far more likely some kind of foreign substance being exposed to us. Was it the lubricant he used to maintain the Leviathan? Was it the cleaners he used to keep the workspace spotless? I could not explain how his colleagues, working from other laboratories in other states, would have the same dream. I pressed my father on this, trying to discern if they had the same Leviathan, as I was curious if they would be exposed to the same glitchy sequence of light. My father was disinterested in my inquiry, his sole focus consumed with deciphering what the star was speaking to us. 3 days later, the color in the star sequence changed. Shortly after, the Leviathan broke. Its sensors had been fried from the luminance of the star it attempted to perceive, a luminance it was sharing to the peering eye of my father, who had leaned into its eyepiece. My father started screaming in a mix of torturous pain and cathartic delight. "It beheld me! It spoke my name!" My father rasped. My tolerance for this madness expired abruptly as I ripped my cell phone from my pocket and dialed 911. The ambulance had to wrangle my father into the stretcher. He was half blind, but fully defiant. He writhed and pleaded not to be taken out of range, whatever the hell that meant. The laboratory is now defunct. My father is not getting better. The doctors have informed me that, even sedated, that he whispers numbers, sequences, and indiscernible codes of information. He will do this for hours on end until his throat begins to bleed. He colors his walls, the craftsmanship of his madness being an oval shape with a misty composition. He laments that the color is off. It should be colorless. It would be so beautiful colorless. He rambles. The thing is, he paints with white paint. On my last visit, his madness had magnified. He clutched my wrists with his bony hand and screamed to me, "It wasn't a star. It was far more glorious. It is the perfect being, the perfect state of existence. His pupils were hardly visible as he said this to me. I was stunned, and in my moment of hesitance, he leaned forward and pressed his skull against mine. It didn't choose me. It chose you. I didn't stay to hear the rest of his madness. My father died a few days later. With his death, my dreams have become more intense. They are always the same, but their vividness varies. After experimentation, I have discovered that this vividness correlates with how close I sleep to the now defunct laboratory. I can't explain this. I can't explain any of this. The only thing I know for certain is, I am moving the hell out of the state. My dog began barking at the cloudy eye. It whimpered and pressed its paws against my leg, trying to get me to move, but I was done running. I had lost my father, my friend, and was on the verge of losing my sanity. I needed answers, and as I saw the misty eye form images inside its cloudy ring, images of a circling dragon and a bubbling pond, I knew. I knew this would end today, one way or another. I let go of my hold on my dog's leash, and it bolted away. Slowly, I walked to my door and entered my house. As I stepped inside, I could hear a whoosh of noise, and the mist began sailing through the chimney. The fireplace rattled as the mist violently traversed across it. The mist then swirled around me for a few moments before shooting to my left and right. There was a bright flash, and finally silence, as two dark figures stood before me. Their bodies were uncanny, dark, shimmering black with inhuman proportions and a bubbling nature. It was as if they were comprised of a suspended liquid, a liquid eager to ripple away. Yet their faces horrified and delighted me. I saw my father's face to the left, and Josh's face to the right. These bodies attached to them, seemingly under their control, somehow providing them a second chance at life. Son, I am glad you are here. I am so glad you are listening. You have been chosen by the deep greatness. Soon, His Eminence will take final form in this world, and he will reshape it. He will make it beautiful, far more beautiful than we could have ever imagined. My father's voice was off. It lacked his calm, pleasant demeanor before Mom died, but also the erratic sanity from after she died. It was cold and distant, but in a persuasive and alluring manner. My heart was unswayed by these seemingly frivolous details. It was good to hear his voice again. "What happened to you?" I said weakly as my eyes bounced from looking at him and at Josh. "We have been given life. Soon, no human will be able to live on this earth, but we will. We have been blessed with beautiful bodies, and soon so will you. You will help us find others that recognize the magnificence to serve him. We will rule this world under his careful watch. Don't you see, son? Don't you see the blessings that we are about to enjoy? We will finally rid this world of its most offensive corruption." My father continued, his voice suddenly venomous. "Oh, what is this corruption?" I asked as I slowly moved across the room. I noticed a small trail of mist drifting around the feet of my two visitors and wafting up and through the chimney. Were they still connected by this trail to the eye? "Fire! That blasphemous element must only exist by the craftsmanship of the master. Humans dare to harness it on their own, and for that they will be punished." My father seethed. I nodded politely, scared as to what any other action would have incurred. "Son, there is something urgent. Our Lord is hungry. Preparing for his arrival will take energy, and he needs more to fully transition. We will need you to lead again. Perhaps you still know Luke? Don't worry. He will still get a beautiful body. He will be okay," my father said, his voice now almost pleading. His eyes were sullen but determined, as they awaited my answer. "Yes, let me text him," I said as my adrenaline began throbbing. I shifted my pace forward nonchalantly as I opened my phone. Slowly, I began typing random inputs into it. I just needed a few more seconds of distraction. "Good, good. You have no idea how great a blessing you are bestowing on him," my father said with a disturbed cadence. "Oh, I know exactly what kind of blessing you have in mind," I hissed as I was now in range of the switch. With a violent snap of my hand, the fireplace was flicked on. I could hear a roaring wail from deep inside my skull. Fire flashed from the fireplace and upward, but also inward. Josh and my father were now ablaze, looking at me horrified. "Why? Why would you do this?" my father asked as he crawled on the ground in agony, the black body of his steaming and hissing as the flames enraged throughout it. "Because you cannot tempt a man who has already lost everything," I barked. Images flashed through my mind. Images of my brother and I in grief over losing both our parents. Images of the horror my friends endured near Mithril, and images of Sally. The heartbreak on her face and the broken trust in her eyes have haunted me for so long. Now, I finally had a reason to justify that pain. If I could stop whatever this thing was, if I could keep this world safe for a bit longer, for Sally to enjoy, it would be worth it. There was a loud explosion, and I was thrust back against a bookshelf. The recoil tipped it over, and the shelf fell on me. I am pretty sure my left arm was broken, but luckily that was the worst of it. After several agonizing minutes, I crawled from underneath the wreckage. My front room was a wreck. The chimney was charred black, but there was no mist. I almost puked when I noticed the bodies. They were still emanating smoke. 2 skeletons dry of flesh, aside for the heads, which almost looked to be still living. I walked over to the face of my father. His eyes were vacant. I realized then that the last conversation with him was not in this room. It was years ago. I shuffled around my room until I found my phone. The screen was cracked and its body was bent, but somehow it still worked. With my right hand I dialed a number I had tried so hard to forget, but I knew I never could. "Sally, we need to talk. I found Josh."